Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1-0 podcast. I'm Joel Haas.
I'm Lyle Allenstein.
And I'm Lexi Linderman.
We thought we were going to have a week off this week, but I guess Michigan had other plans, took down Ohio State. Penn State took care of business against Maryland. Now we're back covering the Big Ten championship game. A little bit unexpected, but we'll go ahead and kind of look at the factors that got Penn State to this situation, and then we'll break down the matchup against Oregon, give our thoughts on that, and then maybe a little bit of playoff talk to finish it out. Guys, first of all, obviously kind of an unexpected situation for Penn State here. Were you able to get eyes on the game, and what were kind of your impressions of that?
Well, I think it might be a mental block thing for Ryan Day. I mean, why are you just trying to win the game on the ground when you have relied on the passing game? I feel a good amount of the season. I would say, and you're also I just don't understand how he can how he actually lost that game. Davis Warren is not good. The rest of Michigan's team not good. They were missing a couple guys that obviously would have had an impact for them, and so it shouldn't have been close to begin with. And how is Ohio State only putting up 10 points on offense? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I would say it's honestly just all in the coaching. I honestly just think Ryan Day let everything get to his head, and I think we all saw him post game. He couldn't even believe what had just happened. And yeah, so I don't know. It was just a weird performance by Ohio State. And I don't think it's indicative of how good their team is. I honestly think it's just I think it was just a coaching problem.
Yeah, I think Ryan Day's the issue. Obviously, you saw him post game on the field, just staring with that blank expression, just couldn't process what was going on. I don't think he's a good coach. I think Ohio State what?
Okay.
What?
That's kind of crazy.
He got that program handed to him.
At this point, everyone on the roster is someone he recruited.
Yeah.
And same with transfers.
But,
he put together the super team, which is the most talented.
I'm not saying
he's
I'm not saying he's bad at recruiting. I just don't think he's a good coach. You're losing to Michigan. The part of that also, not on top of Ryan Day. I don't think Will Howard is built for the moment. But
it's a fair take.
Yeah.
At this point, yeah.
That's obviously there's a lot of pressure being an Ohio State quarterback, specifically considered of recent years, the talent that they're putting out into the NFL. But this makes me always think about the fact that Ohio State, so you look at Kyle McCord, who goes ahead and beats Miami the same week. And, he was quoted post-game saying it was a pretty full circle moment for him. Everything comes full circle. So then it also makes me go back to think the fact that Ohio State, I'm pretty sure in the offseason, was so insanely confident that they were getting Cam Ward. And you see Miami, I think his NIL valuation just flat out from the school. I mean, I don't know if this is exactly correct, but it's $2.1 million or something, and that's without all the brand deals that he has. So Ohio State, I'm not going to be
Which for reference, Mike Portman reported that Drew Aller makes $800K a year. Just kind of point of reference there.
So it's just I'm not quickly going to count Ohio State out of this playoff push at all because they're that good of a roster. Mm-hmm. And you can't also with the fact that I don't believe in any of these top teams. I can't flat out say that any of the teams that are in the running or already clinched a spot in the playoff are that much better than the others. So if Ohio State makes a run, wins the whole thing, wouldn't be surprised. But as we all know, Penn State is now in the Big Ten championship because Ohio State blew out Indiana 2 weeks ago. Penn State took care of business against Maryland. Sherrone Moore pulled through for James Franklin, and Penn State's heading to Indianapolis to go play Oregon this weekend.
Well, and also Ohio State has 2 top 10 wins on the season, and that's just something you don't throw out. Obviously they're a good team. Like I said, I just don't think this Michigan game was indicative of the team at all. I still think they're a very good football team. It's just they screwed themselves over, and that's all there is to it.
Well, yeah, before the season, I picked Ohio State to win the national championship.
You did do that. Can confirm.
I still think I still think they can. I still think they're the best team in the playoffs. At least in terms of talent. Now, obviously, they might mess up, but Michigan's not in the playoffs, so it's what do you have to worry about? But the problem was. But even the Oregon game, I think Ohio State
should have beat Oregon.
If Will Howard slides 1 second earlier,
you could also point to so many other plays in that game where it's just coaching issues.
Maybe. Yeah, Ohio State has enough talent. If it can just overcome the hurdle of Ryan Day, it can win the national championship. I don't know. That's still where I stand. I still think Ohio State's going to win the national championship. I haven't changed. I know they lost twice, but I don't know. That's still my thoughts. But regardless, Penn State, James Franklin said he did not tell his team the results of that game. So for some of them, they weren't aware that a Big Ten championship was on the line against Maryland. You can, choose whether or not to believe that. I think a lot of the players did find out before the end of the game, whether it was pre-game or during the game or even directly after the game when they finally showed on the video board the results of that game. But they all kind of found out at different times, then went into the locker room, and Franklin makes the official announcement that Penn State's clinched, its spot in the Big Ten championship game, which, credit to Penn State. Like, lost a game against Ohio State, didn't let one loss turn into two like they always talk about. Went 1-0, beat the teams it was supposed to beat, and now they're heading to Indianapolis on Saturday with a chance for potentially the biggest game of Franklin's tenure. But, obviously it's not an easy task. Oregon's #1 in the country for a reason. They're undefeated for a reason. And so what have you guys seen from the Ducks that's been impressive this season?
You got to point to the defensive line in Oregon front seven right away. This is a team, granted last week it was Washington, but they got 10 sacks. 43 rushing yards. Jordan Birch and Mateo Ugalele you can make the argument they're the best defensive end duo in the country. That's going to pose a lot of problems for Penn State. That offensive line has been banged up, and you look at right tackle with Anthony Donko now out with a long-term injury. Won't see him again this season. And you got Nolan Rucci, who's seen a fair bit of time this year, obviously, because Donko's been banged up here and there, having to leave games throughout the regular season. So it's not like Rucci's just getting thrown into the fire. He's always that sixth offensive lineman when they run those jumbo sets. But I don't think he's seen a defensive end that's good yet. Obviously, you saw sporadically when against Ohio State with JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. But it's going to be a lot of pressure. I think that Oregon defensive front is really good. Talked to Jeffrey Bassa, linebacker, as well. It's next level on Zoom on Sunday, and he's got obviously a ton of respect for that for Penn State's offense. All the Oregon players that we've interacted with on Sunday have a ton of respect, but they're excited for the opportunity. They gave Penn State's offense way more credit than what nationally it gets, and so I think they're aware of what Penn State can do offensively, and I think they're ready for the challenge. So I think that's the first thing I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think kind of going off that, I think this game is honestly just going to be won in the trenches. I think you have two very good offensive lines and two very good defensive lines. I mean, Abdul Carter's obviously on a tear like he has been all season, and Dennis Sutton is back to full health. And like Lyle said, the Oregon defensive line is just really good. So I think that, like, honestly, it could boil down to just that, like, which team gets more pressure, which offensive line handles it better. Because honestly, both the quarterbacks, I would argue, are mobile. Like, obviously, Gabriel gets the credit for being nifty and extending plays with his legs. But I'm, like, pretty sure Drew Aller has more rushing yards than Dylan Gabriel this year, which, like, kind of shocked me for sure. Lamar Alar. But it kind of shocked me because, like, I've always, like, watching Gabriel, like, he's always been, kind of a dual threat in the pocket, he can run, he can pass, and you don't really, like, think of Drew like that. Like, he's more like a pocket passer, big arm strength kind of guy. But, like, he's been extending plays with his legs all season. I think Ohio State was also a good example of that. I mean, they were getting pressure to him, and he handled it well, would rush when he needed to, everything like that. So I honestly think both those quarterbacks, I think it's going to be a good quarterback duel just regardless. I think Dylan Gabriel gets a lot of credit, and he should get a lot of credit. He's led Oregon to a 12-0 season. He has put up really good numbers, but I also think Drew is a very good quarterback, and I think he's shown that this season. So I honestly just think it's honestly it's a pretty even matchup. I would say I think people are just kind of throwing this one away as like an easy Oregon victory, but I wouldn't say it's going to be necessarily like that.
Yeah, and I think Vegas kind of agrees with you because they put out the initial line at 3.5 points, which obviously, just over a field goal in Oregon's favor, but obviously still a very close game. They're expecting a one-score result in this one, and I did see that they put out the information publicly, and I think it was like 95% of people had bet on Oregon last I checked. So obviously a lot of the money is coming in on the Ducks, and I think from a national perspective, when you look at just going into the game, obviously #1 team in the country, 12-0, they've looked really good for a while. I mean, obviously the Wisconsin game was kind of a little bit of a blip, but outside of that, they've pretty much been blowing teams out. Obviously the win over Ohio State. And then you just kind of look at Penn State's track record in these types of big games, and I think it's hard for people, at least in the general public, to have any faith in Penn State to win this game. But I think maybe that could potentially play in the Nittany Lions' favor. where you're coming into this one with nothing to lose. Last Saturday you weren't expecting to be here. All of a sudden, you're kind of thrown into this game. You don't have as much time to prepare, but maybe you don't have as much time to kind of overthink your strategy and things like that and kind of get in your own way, which is something that Penn State tends to do in these big games. And when you're playing with house money like Penn State is, maybe you're a little bit more loose, a little bit more free, whereas a team like Oregon kind of has, I would say, more pressure on it right now to be able to win this game, as the favorite. Everyone's expecting a good performance and things like that. And I don't know. I just think maybe that gives Penn State the edge here, but at the end of the day, just kind of looking down the roster, I still feel like Oregon's the better team.
I agree. I think Oregon is the better team. You could obviously make all the positional comparisons you want. I think really Penn State's got the advantage at maybe running back. That's not discrediting Oregon's running back. Tight end, obviously, it's Tyler Warren. Oregon's wide receivers, they've got the advantage. But you look at a majority of these positions, and I think they all stack up pretty evenly. I think there's slight advantages on both sides. But I just feel like the difference in this game is really going to always come down to Franklin coaching. Can he win the big game? And you look at these recent stretch of years, he's lost to Ohio State ranked both times, lost to Michigan last year when they were ranked, lost to the Peach Bowl last year. Obviously, that was some injuries, banged up, some coaching changes.
Yeah, that game didn't happen. I don't remember that.
Okay, Joel
I definitely
Haas
didn't spend a week in Atlanta for that.
Yeah,
that never happened.
No Peach Bowl forgetter, Joel Haas. But then you look back, and it's like the last time Penn State won a big game was the 2023 Rose Bowl. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Time. It's hard sometimes. But yeah, and then so it's you look at Franklin's numbers when you talk about versus ranked teams, versus top 10 teams. You also point to versus Ohio State, and the resume is not good at all. And then I've seen a lot of comparisons within this whole playoff stretch, this whole recruiting National Signing Day. Dan Lanning obviously getting a lot of comparisons to what Georgia has been doing in these past recent years with what he's building at that program. Obviously, Lanning spent some time on that Georgia coaching staff. But the win like this, I think I want to put him in the elite coaching tier right now, just with what he's building. Obviously, Oregon's got incredible NIL and facilities and all that good stuff. But a win like this, I think you could make the argument Lanning is top 3. He might already be there, coach. And yeah. Franklin's always been that guy because he's consistently putting out winning records. But, he's not in that elite tier. He's that guy that's going to make your team good. But this is the kind of win. And a lot of the guys we talked to yesterday was Drew Shelton, Jalen Kimber, Tony Rojas. They talked about what a win like this can do for the program. Obviously, Franklin, 1-0. And they're all still going 1-0. But when he was asked about it, his focus was on Oregon and only on Oregon. But a couple of guys, they talked about what it could mean for the future, whether it's recruiting, maybe affecting NIL, just the culture, what it builds around Penn State. They haven't been to the Big Ten championship since 2016. And granted, they had a few things fall into their lap to get there. But if they needed a win with how the college football with the way the college football landscape is changing, this would be the time for it. I think it's going to be hard. I think Oregon, I still think Ohio State on paper is the best team in the country, but due to how they operate sometimes, I'm going to say Oregon is the best team in the country. So a win like this would do wonders.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also just think it's interesting, Penn State as a program. We talk about, everyone kind of thinks it's one of the better programs in the history of college football. They haven't beat a number one team in the country since 1990. And, they don't play a number one team every year. So it's a little, but, regardless, these big wins, it hasn't happened at all really recently. I mean, you just look to 2016 Ohio State as really the last big win this program's had. And so it's is Franklin capable of building a year that mirrors that? Because the problem that year was that he didn't take care of the inferior opponents, and he's fixed that problem. But now he can't beat any good team. So it's can he finally beat a top 5 team, and not even just a top 5 team, the number one team in the country like this? But I also think this might be his best chance to do that. I think honestly all the teams this year are just very hand in hand. You can make the argument that anyone is the best team in the country, and I think that's completely different from years past. I mean, last year, Michigan and Washington were basically rolling out NFL rosters in the playoffs, and that's not really something you're seeing as much this year. I do think Oregon has the talent where you could maybe make the argument, but regardless, I still just don't think any team is at the level that we've seen the years past. And so I think this is Franklin's best chance. Do I think that he can finally do it? Probably not. I mean, he's basically lost every game he's not favored in the past 3-4 years. And he's not favored in this game. So it's why should anyone believe
ball don't lie
that why should anyone believe that Penn State can actually win this game? Like, I do think the rosters are pretty evenly matched, like Lyle said, but I just think it comes down to coaching at the end of the day.
So, I mean, I think we can all agree that, like, on paper, obviously, Oregon's a better team. They're ranked higher. They're favored in this matchup. But if Penn State is going to win this game on Saturday, what do you guys view as, like, the keys to victory? Like, who needs to step up for Penn State to win?
Tyler Warren, I think.
What?
No, like seriously. Like, I just think, like,
Yeah, he hasn't been doing enough.
Yeah,
we need some more out of him.
Man, this
Yeah, I
guy
don't think-
cannot
He's
do
got to
it.
pick up the.
This guy cannot
pick
do
up the slack.
anything. I need a player that breaks every single program record, plays quarterback sometimes, can run the ball, efficient blocker. I need that guy to step up.
He's just
No,
not
no.
meeting the
Can
standard.
Yeah,
Can
I
you
know.
let me explain? I don't think, no, it's not him personally needs to step up. I think it's the offense in general. Like, I think Annie Kolonicki needs to, like, in general, just get the ball to him as much as possible, because I think the problem with the Ohio State game was, like, Ohio State did a pretty good job, like, locking him up and, like, keeping him from, like, having explosive plays. Like, when he did, like, that was when Penn State got to the 2-yard line. That was when, like, the offense started to, like, go, like, actually, like, put things together. And so I think the coaching staff needs to just get the ball to Tyler Warren, because if Harrison Wallace III is not healthy, like, which is a possibility. I mean, we saw him at practice yesterday. He looked, fine. But, like, if he's not ready to go, like, who else are you throwing the ball to? Like, Omari Evans, Liam Clifford. Like, I don't think they stand a chance against the Oregon defensive back. So it's like you need I'm not saying Tyler Warren hasn't been doing enough. Like, he obviously has been doing more than enough. But like but he is, at the end of the day, like Penn State's offense. Like, that's what, like, he gets that going. And so I think the coaching staff, like, just really needs to get him the ball. And, like, that is...
Yeah, so I'm going to just go off that. I was going to say who needs to step up. I was going to say everyone on offense not named Nick Singleton and Tyler Warren, because they should be expected to produce. They've been the two best offensive players all year. So I think it's a given that Penn State's going to give them the ball. So obviously you need them to produce, but it's expected at this point. So, but off of that, you mentioned all the wide receivers. I think Harrison Wallace, obviously I'm not speculating, he looked better when we were at practice yesterday running routes. Obviously he showed up during warm-ups, but I think he bobbed his head to the Beaver Stadium Ox. He wasn't really running routes, doing anything, didn't take any snaps during the game. So I think you need to see the wide receiver step up. Omari Evans has come along as of late. I think they're trying to get him more involved. I think he's my player to watch offensively. But then other than that, I think Katron Allen. He has not been getting enough touches. I think his yards per carry has dipped at least a little bit within the recent stretch of games. And Nick Singleton, he's been playing way better this whole week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever. It's been talked about how he's finally, I think the quote was from Franklin, as close to 100% as he's been. And he showed it. Last week, 13 carries, 87 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did fumble on his first snap, but then that next play, he took that kickoff return 66 yards down the sideline. And I think he's been looking great. I mean, obviously, that Oregon defensive line is going to be aware of what he can do. That defensive line is really talented. They're going to be able to get to the backfield. But they both play. Singleton plays better when Katron can produce. And that's not a knack on what Singleton can do by himself or what Katron is as a player. They just feed off each other better. They've seen it both since they stepped on the field together as freshmen. They're now in year 3. They've had games. There's some stat where it's like they both combine for over 130 all-purpose yards or something like that. And Penn State's record is way in favor of the winning column. So I don't really know what Katron's workload is going to be. When Franklin was asked about it, not against Maryland, against Minnesota, he said it was a game flow thing about why he didn't get limited touches. I don't think he touched the ball in the first half. And then I think he got it right when the second half started. I think he took the carry for 10 yards. And then I don't think he had a positive play from scrimmage since. So my attention, I think they need to get Omari Evans the ball. And I think Katron needs to show up just so he can feed off Singleton. They could work off each other better.
Yeah, I also think the defensive line has obviously produced great football this year, but again, this is their toughest task, and I think that getting pressure on Dylan Gabriel is going to be so important if they want to win this game, because especially Dylan Gabriel has thrown 4 interceptions in the red zone this season, and he has 6 total on the season. I think this it could be a thing where it comes down to the Penn State defense getting a red zone interception on Dylan Gabriel, and it's you could get that if Abdul Carter is getting to Gabriel in 2.5 seconds, which I think is his average for the season. I think I read that, I heard that somewhere. It's something like that. It's something insane, and so I think you need to make they need to make Dylan Gabriel uncomfortable, and I think.
Do you think it would help if they put Tyler Warren on the defensive line, or would that be too much for him?
I think that might feel a little too much.
Okay, I was just wondering.
I think I don't know if you can ask him to do all that.
Okay.
but I think the defensive line just needs to get pressure, and that was something they struggled with early in the season. I mean, like I remember the Bowling Green game, they were like not getting pressure, and I was like, what is going? Like these are supposed to be some of the best defensive ends in the country, and like they've obviously come on throughout Big Ten play. Abdul Carter, like 10 sacks in the season. So I just think, but Oregon's offensive line is very legit, and so they really should need to get that pressure on Gabriel. They need to make Gabriel very uncomfortable. And the other thing I want to look at is the special teams, because I think in a game like this, like Jalen Kimber said, every yard matters, every point matters, and Riley Thompson is not having a great season. And if you're not gonna be punting the ball far and getting Oregon backed up with like 90 yards to go or like 85 yards to go, like it's gonna be hard to stop the Oregon offense. So I think also special teams, I also think Ryan Barker needs to be pretty much perfect. Like you can't afford any missed kicks in a game like this. So I think special teams is also like an underground kind of thing.
Well, this is also the Duzansky Bowl.
Yeah, that's important.
The long snappers for both teams are who's Oregon? So Penn State has Tyler Duzansky. Oregon has Nick Duzansky as starting long snappers for both teams. So I guess it just runs in the family. And that like probably won't play any impact on this game. Like I don't anticipate either of them having a major impact on the game.
They probably got a good feel for what
funny.
each other brings to the table, though.
Yeah, maybe some scouting, maybe some mind games going on before the matchup. They go home for Thanksgiving. They're talking about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do want to go back to running backs. I thought that was an interesting point, and I was kind of looking into it a little bit more as you were talking. Oregon has been susceptible against the run at points this year, but only to specific running backs, which is really interesting to me because for most games, they pretty much do a good job of locking down the run. But against Boise State, Ashton Genty, obviously a Heisman, front runner right now, probably going to finish second in voting if things hold. But obviously he had a great performance. I think he went over 200 yards against Oregon. And that's something he's done against everyone, so you can't really blame Oregon for that. I mean, to a certain point, you can't really stop him. But even when you look at other games, you could stop Ashton Genty.
Do you want me to should I act out me in the trenches?
Yeah,
no, sorry, we could maybe another time.
But looking at some of the other games that Oregon played, like against Ohio State, right, which obviously is an extremely talented team with two very good running backs. Travion Henderson had 8.7 yards per carry, almost 9 yards per carry. I don't know why Ohio State didn't go to him more because Quinshon Judkins, 2.1 yards per carry. And they had almost the same exact number of carries, but 8.7 versus 2.1. And I think Travion's a little bit lighter, a little bit quicker on his feet. That's at least in my mind how I view them. And then you look at the Michigan game, kind of similar thing where Donovan Edwards, 5.1 yards per carry. Kalel Molling's only 2 yards per carry. Donovan Edwards, a little bit lighter, a little bit faster. So when you look at this game, I'm thinking Nick Singleton maybe has the advantage in this one just because of that speed, that breakaway speed. And we've seen what he's been doing over the last 3 weeks. Yards per carry going way up on an incline. He said he feels a lot healthier now. He's back to 100%. James Franklin talked about it. He's had a lighter workload the last few weeks. I think they might rely on Singleton really heavily, and this could be a big game for Singleton where if they keep feeding him the ball and he can consistently get 5, 6, 7 yards, move the chains, these long, slow, methodical drives where you're just feeding Singleton over and over again, I think he could really put this game away and be a key to victory for Penn State.
I like that. I think you cooked here.
Some research on the fly.
I think one player we didn't talk about that I think is important because we talked about Dylan Gabriel. Drew Aller, just like James Franklin, not won a big game since he's been here. Granted, last year there were some, offensive coordinator play calling issues with Mike Yursich.
Hey, he beat Illinois.
He did beat Illinois.
Number 21 Illinois.
He did beat, and he technically was on the roster for the Rose Bowl. Did get snaps. But this obviously we've seen it when you talk about it not just from a maturity standpoint. Last year we've talked about it. Post-game meltdowns, immature, not built for the moment. People criticized him a lot, rightfully so. This year, way more poised. Obviously, the only matchup that has been against an elite caliber team was Ohio State, and they scored on their first drive. Like moved down the field and offense. Some play, believe it or not, play calling. You throw Tyler Warren that gets that ball to the goal line. This might be a different game, but it's just this he's got to prove he can play in this game. He hasn't won a big game. This is his moment, just like Franklin to prove to college football he's here for it. James Franklin talked about a few Mondays ago how he was asked about Drew, something along the lines of not getting the attention that he deserves, and he said he knows why. Didn't elaborate on that at all. He said he wasn't going to elaborate on it. Got followed up with that on Wednesday. He said he understood the question, but he's not going to answer it. I think I've talked about this before, but I think the reasoning he's not getting the same kind of hype as, the Jalen Milroe, Shadur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, is that he hasn't won a big game. And down the line, he's got all the intangibles to be an NFL caliber quarterback. Obviously, we don't know if he's going to stay or declare, but his draft stock, I think, is fluctuating between like 3rd and 5th round right now if he were to go. But he's got all the tools to be, I think, at least in this year's draft class, the top quarterback. And I think he's got the most promising NFL career of all quarterbacks in this year's class, but he doesn't have that big win. So I think he's got that opportunity to show it.
Yeah, I also think, going back to, a coaching thing, like you mentioned last year, there were some offensive coordinator problems and everything like that. I think you mentioned that first drive against Ohio State, and the drive kind of fell apart the second they took Drew out of the game for Warren or for Bo. I think in this game, you have to lead. If Drew, say Drew is, having a nice drive, they're driving, you have to, you cannot afford to have, the offense be confused when Bo comes in and draw a penalty. You can't, you cannot have that happening. And so I think, obviously, it's going to depend on how Drew's playing and everything like that. But if Drew is in a rhythm, we've talked about this all year, how, sometimes Drew will be in a rhythm and they'll pull him out to put Bo in. I think in a game of this level, you just need to let Drew stay in and just do what he's been doing all year. Because I think he's having a great year. I think, he has been underappreciated. And like Lyle says, because he hasn't won that big game. But I also wouldn't put the Ohio State loss necessarily on him. I don't think anyone around him besides Tyler Warren really stepped up that game. And so I think it's kind of hard to, but obviously he gets the blame. He's the quarterback. That's how that works. So, but I just think, they need to let Drew stay in a rhythm if he has a rhythm. If they get the ball first, let's say they're, driving down the field, they reach the red zone, and then, Bo Prabula takes a snap. That's a problem. They just cannot have that happening. And so I think they just need to let, I just don't think any Koloniki cannot be too cute on Saturday. And I think he has he's very creative with his play calls, and it works to Penn State's favor, but he can get too cute. And I think, the beginning of the Maryland game, when, Penn State's offense just could not get anything, I think Andy Koloniki was being way too cute. And so I just don't think that can happen against the number 1 team in the country.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the same thing happened just last Saturday against Maryland because Katron Allen went to take a snap and dropped it.
Oh, it was horrendous.
All of a sudden, Penn State just loses yards after it was moving down the field, and it just kills all the momentum. So I think if your players are, playing well, you just have to let them go. You know what I mean? Don't stop them. Don't try. And if you're struggling, obviously that's when you can switch things up and try and figure something out, maybe try new things. But as long as the offense is rolling, I think you just have to let them play. And I think they will if that does happen on Saturday. I'm anticipating a shootout. We can kind of transition into our score predictions now. But I have Oregon winning this one 31-27. I think it'll be a tight game. Like I said, a shootout, kind of going down to the wire. But I think Oregon's just too good and will win in a close one.
Do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
Oh, I was just, I thought you were going to go.
Forgot we were podcasting.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking about how I want to rationalize this.
Oh, God.
So I've got Penn State winning 27-24. Do I think that they're the better team on paper? No. Do I think that Dylan Gabriel is more built for the moment than Drew Aller? Yes. He's won big-time games. I point to last when he was at Oklahoma when he won that Red River rivalry game against Texas. Do I think Dan Lanning is more built for the moment than James Franklin? Yes. So you're probably wondering, why all these things are pointing towards Oregon and why I'm picking Penn State. At this point, I just have a feeling. Penn State has not won a ranked game since 2022 against Utah in the Rose, or 2023, that Rose Bowl. You can make the argument they haven't won a game as big as the Ohio State game in 2016. So I honestly, you could say these past few years, you could say that Penn State's been due to beat Ohio State and win these kind of games. I've never agreed with that. I always thought Ohio State was going to win. But I think now they're due. I think it's time. If Oregon wins by 2 scores, am I going to be surprised? Absolutely not. But I think Penn State, the line's 3.5. So I think they cover, right? Yeah, 27-24. Penn State, first Big Ten championship since 2016.
I've got Oregon winning 21-17. I think it's going to be a defensive battle in this one. I think both these defenses are just really good. I think Penn State's defense is going to do like basically all it can to stop Oregon's offense, but at some point, Penn State's offense is just going to have to do something, and I don't think they're going to. And I think Penn State's defense is just, at the end of the day, it's hard to stop Oregon's offense the entire game. They're going to let something slip. Something's going to happen. And I think it's going to be close throughout. I think it's going to be a very low-scoring affair, but I just think Oregon is the more talented team. I think Dan Lanning is more built for the moment than James Franklin, like Lyle said. I have Oregon winning by 4, and that's that.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you guys for tuning in and watching. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We'll be back with you guys next week. But to find more coverage, you can go to psucollegian.com and follow us on socials.
See you in Indy.